So this has just been a topic I've been interested in. Of course, I retired from UT more than a year ago. I still can't believe it's been more than a year. But I was hired there 1987 as an agricultural climatologist. So obviously I've been real interested in the interface between farming and agriculture, although I worked in a lot of other fields too related to the environment, like water quality and stuff. But hopefully I'll convince you why I kind of call it climate smart rather than some of these other terms that you hear a lot about when people are talking about climate change and farming. So this is just some of the terms that are thrown out there. I'm not going to cover them all today, but this, there's probably way more than even this. We had a talk the other night from Harvey Broom Group, and she was talking about agroecology and looking at some of the sustainable farming systems in Cuba. They were kind of forced into it there because they weren't able to import fertilizers. So they learned how to do organic agriculture really well. So she'd been studying, the systems in Cuba and how they were maintaining themselves. And although I think they're struggling a little bit right now. But I'm not going to, as I said, I'm not going to go through all these different topics, but I'll probably hit a few of them as I go through this presentation. So first of all, I just thought I better start with soil. You can grow plants and other things besides soil. There's hydroponics and there's peat and there's some of that, growing medium that you can buy at the plant store and stuff like that. But soil that we think of. But anyway, it's just the unconsolidated mineral organic matter on the immediate surface of the earth. It serves as this natural medium that we use to grow the land plants, whether they're natural plants or plants that we're growing in agriculture. Just the 5 soil forming factors, the current material, that's kind of the basis of what the soil will eventually end up looking like, in terms of the different minerals, but also the relief, the topography, if it's a hillside or the top of a hill or on a floodplain, organisms, including humans, climate, obviously, and time. So one of the poll questions was, and I'll just ask folks, and maybe wants to throw the answer out, or is how long do you think it takes to form 1 inch of soil?
10,000 years.
Oh, woo, hopefully not that long. Anyone have another guess?
I was going to say 100 years.
Yay, Diane. Yes, it's an average. And Chris, there may be some soils that maybe it does take them that long, but soil scientists pretty much agree on average it's about 100. Oh, look at that. I got the answer right up there on the slide. The typical consists of about 45% mineral, which usually is in the components of clay, sand, and silt. 5% organic matter, which is considered, to be pretty good organic matter. You can get soils higher than that, but if you're at 5%, it's usually considered pretty good. 20 to 30% water and 20 to 30% air. And so what we're talking about tonight is this thing of soil organic matter and how can we get, more carbon sequestered in that soil organic matter. So it's the organic component of the soil, which includes the small fresh plant residues like the roots and things like that, small living organisms, decomposing organic matter, and stable organic matter, which we call humus. And just so you know, about 30% of the terrestrial area on the planet of the Earth is what we consider that the soils would be suitable for agriculture. So, we're starting to get to, they talked about that the other night at the Harvey Broom Group topic. Are we at like the capacity for producing food on the planet? I don't think we're at the capacity of producing food, but the actual agricultural land, I think we're starting to get to the total amount that we've got available. We've pretty much, you think the rainforest, the Amazon rainforest that they've gone in to clear to plant soybeans and have livestock and stuff. It turns out to be about 7.5% of the total area of the planet because, we're a water planet. So we have more water than anything. So this is just some charts that I've gotten from the U.S. Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, just showing you that, after we had our recession back in 2008, you can see our carbon emissions kind of tapered off a bit, and they really haven't bounced back up again. I mean, there are fossil plants that have come offline, and transportation, I don't know about now, but until recently had kind of ticked down a little bit because a lot of folks were commuting and not commuting, working remotely and stuff. So I think the idea, this just goes through 2019. I think the idea is it's probably going to start ticking a little bit back up again. But the important thing that I want to point out is how much agriculture is responsible for the greenhouse gas emissions, because you don't think of the same thing that you're hoping will help with greenhouse gases is also producing greenhouse gases. And, it just comes from, gases being released from the actual land, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, things like that. But then, the diesel that they use for irrigation and for equipment and stuff. So it comes to about an average of about 10% of the total greenhouse emissions. Of course, I'm not going to go into all the things you could do to reduce that. I mean, obviously, anytime you reduce tillage, so you don't have to go over your land as often. Oops, got a sirens going by me outside. Then you would reduce your diesel there. And irrigation pumps, you could go to drip irrigation, or you could go to solar powered pumps and things like that. So there's a lot of kind of operational things you can do that perhaps would, cut down on the greenhouse gas emissions. But we're not going to cover.
Real quick,
question. Sure.
I've been hearing, a lot of the discussion is the primary greenhouse gas is methane from the cattle industry. And I'm hearing something like 40% of the agricultural greenhouse gases are coming from cattle. Can you address that?
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised at all, because we definitely have a big issue with the methane. And they are doing things like trying to adjust their feed and breeding the cattle to make them so I guess they fart less.
The different foods.
Different foods, yeah. But the number one thing, that I'll mention a couple times through this talk is we have got to cut down on our animal agriculture. It's not that it's not completely suitable everywhere. I mean, there are some lands that you can't really grow crops on, and livestock are well suited to them. But there's a lot of livestock being grown in places that they really shouldn't be. And we just eat too much meat. So and it's the whole world now. It's not just us anymore. Everybody's eating too much meat. So just to show you what the capacity of the soil is to retain carbon, or to store carbon, I mean, it kind of pales compared to like carbonate rocks or the oceans, for instance. But still, in terms of terrestrial systems, the soil actually can hold quite a bit. Most of the organic matter is just being held in that top meter of the soil, where you've got a lot more of the organic matter for sure. Sequestering carbon is a very cost-effective option for mitigating climate change, and it gives you all kinds of additional benefits. It improves soil fertility and other ecosystem services. It provides climate resiliency, and that's where that whole climate smart agriculture comes into play. So it just does a lot of other good things besides sequestering the carbon. But the problem with it, especially if we start to move into carbon credit programs where farmers will actually get money for sequestering a certain amount of carbon in the soil, it's really hard to measure. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, we've already talked about the soil organic matter is made up of this plant and animal materials in the various stages of decay and microbes and things like that. It can sequester around 2,000 petagrams of carbon in 25 years, which would be more than 10. And this is the perfect situation, which would be more than 10% of the man-made emissions. So that would be a pretty good chunk. It's kind of, a lot of us think of it as kind of a low-hanging fruit, because most of it is stuff farmers should be doing anyway. But the losses from soil, because you still would have losses, would be decomposition by microorganisms, because that's obviously part of the natural process. A big thing is erosion. That is something we have really got to deal with, is cutting back on erosion. And then off taking, from the plants and the animal production, you're removing some of the carbon that way too. So we do have a lot of carbon, in the soil, but we have a lot of potential to put more in for sure. So here is just the potential for sequestering carbon. And you can see that we have a lot of places that have a lot of potential for sequestering carbon in the soil. There's some places like out in the dry West and stuff, there's probably not a lot of hope for out there, but here in the Eastern US and then going up towards Canada, South America, Europe, there's a lot of places that just have soils in a very good situation that they could absorb a whole lot more carbon. The problem with carbon, and then if you get into carbon credit, it's hard to measure carbon in soil. It usually requires many, many years of collecting data. It's not as easy to measure as just a pipe from a car or from a fossil plant, where you can have a pretty good estimate of how much carbon dioxide is being pumped out. It is tricky, and there's all kinds of different ways that they use to measure it. You can do laboratory wet digestion in the laboratory, field level experiments, whole ecosystem experiments, and then a lot of modelers will do whole regional models on carbon sequestration in soils. So lots of different approaches that I think is going to make it a little problematic to come up with a fair system of evaluating how much carbon is being sequestered in a particular farm or area that they could get credits for. You can do pit excavation is one example, just a lot of heavy work, making pits and stuff and sampling all the different layers of the soil and taking them to the lab and calculating the organic matter and doing wet digestion and everything. So it's very time intensive, and it's just a snapshot. And so you have to do it over many, many years to get really good data of having a good idea of what the carbon balance is in that particular soil. We do soil cores. They do that too, where you just got a core of soil and then you take that out and you do all the lab measurements with that too. This has become more popular probably in the last 10 or 20 years, where they have actual gas chambers that are located over the soil that will measure the gases, coming out of the soil and kind of come up with some sort of a soil carbon balance equation. Very expensive. This is Lycor equipment out of Nebraska. So many tens of thousands of dollars to set up a field. And once again, you have to take a lot of years of data before you have a really good idea of it. But I think that in terms of carbon credits, it's more like this kind of technology may be more acceptable because it's easier to quantify the data in lots of places. Digging those soil pits is very time consuming. This is the one that I think has the most hope, because this is the one I worked on, and it's a micrometeorological method. So this one is using actually what they call the eddy correlation method, and there's also a Bowen ratio method. And without going into a lot of details, it basically just has an anemometer, which measures wind speed, but it goes in 3 directions. So it gets the two directions going laterally, but then it also gets the wind speeds going up and down. And so by knowing the wind speeds and measuring something like moisture, even though you don't have, it's actually just measuring carbon just in one little sensor down towards the bottom. This is a carbon sensor there. But by knowing how the wind is moving, you can do some really great modeling to figure out how much carbon is going in and how much carbon is going out and how much carbon is going out of the field. So, and it's not super expensive. It's gotten a lot more reasonable. This whole setup here is about maybe $6,000.
Do you get?
This is a field actually in Africa, and you can see they're doing no-till. So that's what they were doing, was comparing the carbon content retention or sequestration in no-till fields, and I think they were wheat. I want to say it was in Malawi, and versus a field that had no cover at all. It was just conventionally plowed. And there was quite a big difference, in how much carbon was at the end of it. That we did it for 3 years, how much carbon was being sequestered. It was probably about maybe 3 times more carbon was in the soil at the end of 3 years when we started to measure it to the end of it, compared to the conventional tillage, which just had bare soil when the wheat wasn't there. So it really can make a difference. Some of these simple conservation techniques, like in this case, it would be no-till, where they're not really tilling the soil at all. But it's kind of interesting equipment to set up. So this is where, where a problem with our soils is we treated our soils so badly. And it's not just our country, it's been all over the world. There's some places that still have really beautiful, deep, gorgeous soils, but you think of some of the erosion rates that go on, 4 or 5 tons per acre per year. I mean, it's just astronomical how much, and it can be by water or by wind. Of course, we have chemical deterioration, other kinds of degradation going on, but it's erosion. So if you don't have as much soil, and you're starting to wipe off that 1 meter that you've got to hold carbon, and you're washing it away, then you're just automatically eliminating a lot of potential for holding carbon. So probably one of the most important things, which you'll see as we move into this climate smart farming, is keeping the soil on your farm. It's so important to do, and that you do that by keeping the vegetation and the ecosystem working, so that you don't have these huge amounts of wind and soil erosion. And of course, we have this issue of urbanization and urban sprawl and suburban sprawl. They're, covering, I mean, if your soil's covered with a parking lot or a strip mall, it definitely has no potential for sequestering carbon. So there's a lot of that going on all over the world too, where soil, and a lot of times very good agricultural soils, are getting covered up with, subdivisions and things like that. We see that happening in Nashville all the time. But just to show you all of, these are the multiple impacts of global warming and the climate disruption on agriculture, because, we know farmers are concerned. They're an interesting group to work with. I've been out there, we talk about climate change. It's, you try not to get into the politics, because where most of their politics are, and it's hard. But if you can come at it from this aspect, that this will make their farm, more profitable if they can, ameliorate or have more resiliency in their farm, so that they don't have all these negative impacts of pests and droughts and floods and heat stress and all of this. Some things you probably can avoid, like hail or freezes, some of those things. You can do some things, but they're not usually related to carbon sequestration. But there's a lot of things that go on that, by improving that vegetative cover and the infiltration and organic matter in your soil, you are making your system more resilient to all of these outside kind of climate and weather impacts on your fields. Especially flooding and droughts, those are 2 really huge ones there. But you can see how complicated it is. I mean, even tropospheric ozone, we don't think of that much with climate change, because it's, lower level, but, it damages crops quite significantly. So this is just, these are the things that I studied while I was at UT, was, what was the impact of droughts on our crops and floods and wind. We don't get that much in Tennessee, but I actually worked out in Nebraska for a while. And like John was mentioning, out there, they say if the wind ever stops, everybody would fall over. So very windy. Hail, which we do have quite a bit of hail damage in Tennessee, but not as much as they have further west of us. Heat stress, we've had a lot more of that in Tennessee lately. Freezes, peach trees, it's been a really serious problem for peach trees, because we've had warmer winters, which have made the trees come out of their dormancy period quicker. And so they're more susceptible. They're starting to flower earlier. And then we still have our freezes like in March, late March, early April, and it can just totally wipe out your peach crop. So we don't grow as many peaches in Tennessee as we used to. And pests are difficult to predict. There's just all kinds of different things. Some pests get worse, some pests get better. But in general, they figure climate change is going to make most of the insects more common because they won't get killed during the winter, or they'll just have more cycles and just reproduce more. And so we know we see that in the natural systems too, a lot more problems with pests when temperatures get warmer. So as I went through that list of terms at the beginning, regenerative agriculture is just this one that's getting thrown all over the place now. But it's basically where you're trying to partner with nature more, maybe doing some intercropping, or you're definitely doing cover crops. You might be doing some agroforestry, a lot of conservation tillage, maybe no-till, a lot more diversity because, we're so married to monoculture. Boy, I don't know, by 2050, I still don't think we're going to be out of monoculture. I try to be hopeful, but, maybe crop rotations, I think, will probably be more, where you might do, soybeans followed by wheat or corn or whatever. But boy, I don't see us getting out of monoculture. So we're going to have to do a lot of other things because we won't have this chance of doing a lot of diversity. And a little more holistic, where you're thinking about the community and pests and beneficial insects and pollinators and all those other things too. So so what we're trying to do with industrial ag is to get them to at least do some of the components of regenerative agriculture, with the idea that not only would they maybe be getting carbon credits down the road, but they would be reducing carbon emissions, which would be good for the planet, obviously, but they would be making their farm more climate resilient too, and especially with rainfall. This is like the utopia, right? The whole planet looked like this and all our food was produced like this, local, organic, agroecology, diverse, pollinators, the whole works. This would be gorgeous. But and it's wonderful that we're getting more of these for sure, but this is probably not going to be, the main form of agriculture in 2050, I don't think. But it's just to give you an idea, you've got some wildflowers in there, so you're attracting pollinators. You've got, lots of different species growing in there. The soil looks gorgeous, doesn't it? You can just kind of tell from here, it looks so beautiful. And it'd be great if this is how we could produce all our food, but I'm not holding my breath.
They got
this is more
balance real well.
This is more of what, agriculture is probably going to look like, but it can still, this is no-till. So they're, leaving the residue and they're planting with a no-till planter into the residue. So you would think everyone's just got it in their minds that by, working up the soil and plowing it and everything, you're going to make it nice and loose and lovely. Well, no, it actually doesn't work that way because you're running over the soil with huge, heavy equipment. So if you can avoid running over the soil with huge, heavy equipment, you don't compact it. So it actually thrives. It does a whole lot better if you just don't plow it at all. There's some soils that are just in situations where they kind of have to be plowed every now and then, but Tennessee's known as the state that basically invented no-till agriculture. We're kind of famous for it, and they have every other year now. It used to be every year. They have a no-till day out at Milan, Tennessee, because that's it was West Tennessee where it kind of got really popular. So Tennessee actually percentage-wise has a huge percentage of the large-scale farms that use no-till agriculture, which is, as Antoinette was asking, this is, you would not believe. I've had weather stations at no-till versus conventional, and I couldn't even walk out to my weather. Okay, so I think I also mentioned agroforestry. I think there's a lot of potential here and this would help wind erosion for sure, especially out west, where they have a lot more, wind, and so there's a lot of interest. Of course, they've always had windrows out west, but I think more farms could incorporate agroforestry. But it is a little harder to do conventional agriculture when you've got, rows of trees going down. But it's working. They've got places where it works, and it definitely helps with wind erosion, and then increases the diversity and the wildlife and lots of other beneficials, and improves the infiltration of the soil and lots of other co-benefits, as they say. I'm a big fan of biochar. We burn so much waste in this country, or bury it in landfills, and I think a lot of it could be converted anaerobically into biochar, which is almost like a kind of like a charcoal. I don't know if you've ever seen a biochar. The Dominican Republic, where I worked for a couple years, they were super into it with all the banana plantation residues. So they were actually incorporating biocharing the plant, the banana plant residues, and then incorporating them back in the soil. And it increases the carbon content for sure, and it definitely increases the infiltration and the organic matter without a problem. And so I think there's a growing, I know our department back at UT has a big program now studying biochar as a potential for sequestering carbon in soils, and yet also making it more climate resilient to places where I think it would work really well. This is one thing I guess I didn't know, I hadn't really paid attention to where it was, but it's the Growing Climate Solutions Act, originally of 2020, but it got pushed to 2021. It actually got passed last summer by the Senate, but I don't think come up in the House yet, and it certainly has not become law yet. So, and I don't know if now it's tied in with the Build Better, Build Back Better plan. So I'm not sure where it stands, but it would basically be this one-stop shop where they would get this kind of regenerative certification, kind of like you get USDA organic certification. Instead, you'd be getting more this regenerative agriculture certification. It would have an advisory council, and it would start to make some progress in carbon markets. So, but I have to admit, I searched online. I couldn't really find out like when it was going to come up in the House or anything. So I wish I knew more about it. But a lot of companies had signed on to it as supporters of it. Some of them obviously are agriculture companies. I guess you got to be careful, though, that they don't use it as greenwashing, that they actually do something, regenerative as part of their
I don't see
production.
the Sierra Club on that logo.
Right. Of course, that logo is probably from 2020. So, I mean, I don't know if they have updated list of it or not. But basically, the USDA would be kind of over this act. So would be providing extra capital for the farmers to implement this climate smart agriculture and forestry practices. So they would have like websites that would give them all kinds of guides and stuff and provide technical assisters. They'd have like the organic program, this third-party verifier system, and then hopefully to provide farmers like they do with the with the crop reserve program and some of the other equip programs and stuff that they have, provide some revenue streams for them, doing some of these climate smart practices and sequestering carbon. This is also climate smart agriculture. The goal would be it would increase productivity because you're improving your soil and your nutrients. Normally that should improve your productivity, would increase your net return because hopefully you wouldn't have quite as few expenses too. Improve input use, reduce emissions of carbon and other gases, not just carbon dioxide, but methane and nitrous oxide too. Increase your resilience. That's the real important part of it. And increase gender and social inclusions. That's what they're trying to. I listened to, it was probably a month ago, to a podcast about, I mean, I knew the USDA and the loan issue with Black farmers was bad, but until I listened to that podcast, I had no idea the history of that and how awful it was. And so this would be one way that they could start to recoup some of the terrible, terrible things they did to Black farmers when they were trying to get loans just to plant. So this is, Antoinette had asked, this is like just a laundry list of all the things they could be doing to improve the carbon sequestration. And a lot of these could apply perfectly fine to industrial agriculture. So just lots and lots of, I'll give you a second to kind of look through them. So something like restoring the riparian zones and just alley cropping, just lots and lots of things. The windbreaks again, grass waterways, to control erosion and things like that. So conservation covers, so just lots and lots of things they could be doing that would sequester more carbon. So just one thing, because it's supposed to also involve some social equity. We have to remember that 80% of our farms, our farmland, are owned by old folks. Half of the farmers are over 75. So they have been kind of reluctant. A lot of the really large scale farmers, they kind of are set in their ways, and they've been a hard sell. I have a lot of friends who work in extension, and it's hard to move a lot of them to do things, even to do things like the crop reserve program and stuff like that. You have younger folks coming in, you hope, that might be a little more progressive. I'm not really sure. In terms of small farms, it definitely is getting more diverse. Definitely younger folks, more Blacks, more Hispanics, more Asians, more Latino. I already said Latinos, yeah. More women doing small scale agriculture. The large industrial farms, it's still pretty much old white guys that are running that whole industry. So it's going to be hard to change that. You can see how small the percentages are for the diversity, with about 95% of them being white that do farming in this country. So we definitely have to do something about it. If we want to do the other stuff and start to get carbon credits and climate smart agriculture, we're going to have to start to diversify our agriculture in terms of who's doing it, for sure.
Joanne,
go ahead, John. In Saskatchewan, that shift in the ownership, the old farmers, the younger ones are taking over, but it's a real tough problem because like the ones who are 75 and older like that were there when those farms were maybe 500 to 640 acres. So,
yeah.
And they kept growing,
section,
right? So, yeah. So now those farms are 4,000, 6,000, 8,000 acres, and they hope the son will take over. All he has to do is come up with $20 million to buy it from his dad.
Yeah.
And that makes it really tough. But where the younger guys are getting in there, they're changing the methods with the no-till and so forth, changing the use of chemicals. The one thing that they've done that's harmful that you mentioned is like how they used to have all that carragana growing for the windbreaks, and they cut all those down because they're in the way of the big combines, right? Mm. So now the windbreaks are gone. My mother-in-law grew up in that area, and when she was a kid, she was one of the people who had to go out with the team on a wagon, taking buckets of water out there to water the carragana to get it to grow. They were coming out of the time of the Dust Bowl. And now all of this stuff is gone. It hurts her feelings that it's gone because of all the work that went into it. But there's nothing to replace it.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I've traveled in Peru some. We have all those beautiful Inca terraces, and they're all being abandoned and falling apart. And they were just amazing in terms of controlling erosion on those really steep mountainous soils. So it's kind of sad how a lot of the older things, but maybe they'll come back if there's some economic incentives. That's usually that can be the trick sometimes to get someone to change.
Joanne, the Corley farm's been in our family since 1802. It's like 600 acres, and our cousins, they're 4 kids. They all moved to the city. None of them want to farm. And, now it's just leased out to bigger farmers. But a lot of the young people, they grew up on farms and they don't want to stay there.
Yeah. Yeah, it may take different people. I mean, because I know we have this conservation, ag, and environmental sustainability program at UT that we started just kind of on a whim like 10 years ago, and it's become our largest program in our department in terms of agriculture, because there's just a lot of, but they mostly want to do like the small organic, beehives and all of that. They're interested in agriculture, but they're not interested in the big, large scale agriculture. So, I mean, a lot of them might just get bought up by businesses and just run like as a business with like a foreman and stuff like that. And that's what worries me, because it's really hard without some sort of economic incentives to get them to do the right thing, because the bottom line is all that matters.
That's like our Congressman John Rose from the 6th Congressional District. He's buying up all the huge farms and around Temperance Hall, DeKalb County. It's just being taken over by the big money.
Yeah, I know. And as much as I wish that we were going to have those cute little ecological, sustainable farms, it's not that we won't, we will. And maybe if the price of food, keeps on going up like it's going, more folks will be planting their gardens and this and that. But it's not going to replace industrial ag, especially with the population going up.
What are they buying up all that land for? Housing developments or for farms?
Well, they're running, big combines, cattle, and
running them as farms
and big farms, big soybean guys.
Yeah, so no real attachment to the land, because it's not their family land or anything. I mean, it's not that they're not all evil. There's probably some good ones out there.
Our friends in Saskatchewan own 8,000 acres, and its dad is now selling it to his son. Well, a long time ago, when that was a bunch of 640-acre farms, there were families on all of those things, and the families had 3, 4, 5 kids who all worked on it. And now you have the father and the son, and they hire some of the local people at times of the year, because you need to hire 2 drivers for combines for all of that, and you need to have 1 driver for a truck to haul the grain back there, and that's it. That's all you have coming out of there. The amount of money is just incredible. I mean, even the 2-year lease on a combine is more money than I could ever afford.
That's why they need those loans, which is why it's been so hard for the minority farmers the loans would get approved too late and they wouldn't be able to get planted in time. Yeah.
And then the other factor there is that I rode along on the combine one night, and it was interesting that driving along, Chris turned it to aim at the field, right? And when it got aimed about right, the satellite told him, okay, that's it. And he took his hands off the controls, and the combine drove itself across the fields for a long, long distance, following the way the crops had been planted. At the end, he had to hit a button to raise the front end up and tell the combine that I'm taking control, and aim it for another field and drop it in. Well, one of our friends up there, the mom goes out on the combine, and she reads novels while she's running the combine, because there's nothing to do in the middle of the field in most cases. Well, that we're talking about there with these 2, 3, 4 people taking care of everything.
I know.
All that land, right?
Yeah.
And so the idea of being close to the land and stuff like that, for the Brons, it's a business.
Yep.
He doesn't go out and look at the field and say, oh, what a beautiful crop. Instead, he's got his master's degree, and he knows how to do the calculations and make the money on the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, that's all I've got. If anyone has any other questions, I'm more than willing to try to answer them, or if you have comments, because I'm sure some of you have some experience with farms and opinions of farms. And I mean, in terms of what can we do, if they ever come up with like a regenerative certificate, I mean, there's a lot of products that, it's hard to find organic versions of them. A lot of the like crackers and cookies. And I mean, it's not impossible, but they're not as common as like finding organic tomatoes or something. So, I mean, if you can't do organic, or you can only do a certain amount of organic, then, maybe this other labeling, regenerative would, get you a little bit further in terms of feeling like you're helping at least. And then just don't use much meat.